Well, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is H.G. Chazelle with Advanced Energy Group and MC here at Energy Thought Summit 2018. I'm very excited to be joined here by Michael Bates, who has a global leadership position with Intel, and we're going to have a discussion on, first, evolution versus revolution. Today we heard a lot about the question of whether we are in a digital evolution or revolution, and I think some of the comments we heard today were surprising. So Michael, I'd like to, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and let's talk about this issue.
Yeah, thank you, HG. Michael Bates, I'm the general manager for Intel's energy practice, and for us that's both utility and oil and gas, but obviously we're here today to talk about the utility industry. And great question. I've heard that asked before in a previous conference. This would have been about 7-8 years ago. We didn't get the highest percentage of evolution versus revolution that you got today, but surprised to see the results that again, our audience that are here today, the sample size is a lot of utilities here, and I think they all have felt and probably still feel, obviously, to the results that you got. And by the way, I don't remember.
60%, over 60% said this was an evolution versus a revolution.
Yeah, still pretty high percentage. And I guess part of that is because utilities have been a natural monopoly for so many years, and there has been really one delivery mechanism for the delivery of the commodity energy. And I believe because that's the DNA, that most utilities feel like they're in control of how this new utility of the future is going to roll out. So probably not too surprising that you'd get a response like that.
It made me think of when you saw the 38% that saw this being a revolution. I said, well, that's where I want to put my money, is on those, because that's where you find your Elon Musk, that's where you're going to find your Steve Jobs, that's where you find the leaders of Uber, really seeing a new future that doesn't exist today, that requires a revolution to achieve. And when I think about Intel as a company and the tremendous market share you have to drive market transformation, where do you see the critical points of transformation are, and how Intel can make a difference in making those transformations happen?
Yeah, so before I answer the question, Intel does have high market share in certain markets. We're obviously the major player in the PC market and client compute market. We also have a very strong position in cloud computing and data center. But in this particular industry, we don't have a market share. But I think, to your point, we can apply our convening power to enable this market to move more quickly to what I believe is the utility of the future, which is a distributed grid with consumer-owned loads being aggregated and orchestrated in a way that make them look like traditional baseload. And to me, that is a revolution, and I think it's market-driven, it's consumer-driven, and it's largely outside of the control of the utility. And I think utilities are beginning to wake up to the opportunity to be part of the revolution. And I think we're starting to see some of those folks jump on board.
I think I've seen that as well. I think utilities are waking up to the opportunity and the danger of not understanding how best to reposition themselves, to evolve as the utility into this new dynamic, distributed world that we're going into.
Yes.
And so in that paradigm, where do you prioritize your focus? Is it with the utility, or is it with the end user trying to develop these capabilities and understandings?
It's really both. So I think we see this revolution driving us towards this distributed compute model, where if loads are moving to the edge and the action is moving more to the consumer, where the consumer is more actively involved in the load shapes and contributing their actual loads to the grid, then you need, I think, a more advanced level of compute at the edge as well, to be able to orchestrate how those loads react to different market conditions. So first and foremost, I think we look at the very far edge of the grid to be able to embed compute that allows the entire supply chain to optimize in the new world, where old centralized carbon-based generation is retired and replaced with decentralized, cleaner, renewable energy that's on the edge of the grid, either utility-owned and or consumer-owned. And between those two endpoints, I think there has to be a level of compute installed that doesn't exist today to understand the changing of weather conditions, for instance, and how that changes what the load looks like on the edge, as well as understanding how consumers want to consume energy and taking that information and also adding it into long-term resource planning. So overview is, Intel sees the need for more compute up and down the entire supply chain. And one of our areas of focus right now is embedding that compute in the home and building, allowing consumers that really do want to be part of the utility future to offer up their own demand and or supply to the market. And that does require a level of compute that doesn't exist today. So we are actively engaged with channel partners to roll out those programs on behalf of the utility, branded with the utility.
Demonstrating a new partnership model that is inclusive of the distributed model that hasn't existed before.
Exactly. So the best way for me to illustrate it is, say, day in the life of a utility consumer or an energy consumer in 2020. It's not very long from now, two years from now. And again, I think it's a revolution. I actually think the pace of change is happening that quickly. In those markets where the utilities adopt this more participatory relationship with their customer, the kind of things that you'll see for that customer would be, first, a marketplace where they could go and find a curated set of products and services co-branded with the utility that they want that they push to their customers to, one, create a sticky relationship. So what you would see on this marketplace some of it would look like an energy management service, but some would not look like energy management at all. For instance, with one utility, we're starting with voice-activated grocery shopping as the first platform. This is for limited income customers that live in like food deserts. Then once we've introduced that base technology in the home, we'll go in and do some weatherization and then apply energy management technologies on top of that initial technology we deploy. So a voice-activated device allows the consumer to order groceries and then introduce to that customer other technologies that make their life, more comfortable and more convenient. And then from there, what you'll find as a consumer is a variety of offers. So it could be a rooftop solar offer or an EV charging offer. It could be a pricing program. So you pick and choose what makes sense for you as a customer, and hopefully we get really smart about what you in particular would want versus what someone else would want, and what you find there are offers that you'd be interested in. Once it's done, you pick and choose, we apply some rebates to that. Then what you would find next is someone would come to your door and install these systems for you, train you on how to optimize the use of the system based on the utility program that you adopted. It would probably be very voice enabled, so you could ask what's your bill going to be in the future. You could tell via voice activation how you want the system to operate. Put me in max energy savings mode, or I want to sell everything I'm producing, put it on the grid. Different scenes or skills, if you will, that will be developed for you as a consumer to make your life more convenient, save some money. And then ultimately, I think you as a consumer will have the ability to trade in the marketplace and trade the energy and or demand that you have in your house or building on the market based on different market conditions. It could potentially even be blockchain technology could be used to measure and verify and settle whatever transactions happen. Because you can imagine if this proliferates in the way that we think it's going to, there'll be billions of transactions that occur once the system gets out, and traditional financial systems probably will be too costly to do so. I think that's where we're headed. I think 2020 is probably a pretty good timeline, 22 maybe. But if you think about that timeline and you're a utility, it's gonna keep me up at night, because if most of the utilities that we work with, they're built around the monopoly model. They're built to sustain that business model. The talent in those utilities are there to sustain that. Their systems are in place. So if you think of like a utility billing system, for instance, how many line items are on a utility billing system? Maybe 2 or 3 kilowatt hours. Maybe there's a service charge, and maybe some energy charge. The bill of the future will have many line items for different services that the utility will offer to you on top of the commodity service. So those constraints or obstacles which are embedded in utilities make it challenging for utilities to respond to a more consumer-centric environment. So the utilities have a couple of options. One, they recognizing what is the window of opportunity that I have to extend my brand and extend my services into the home and create these really sticky relationships. Do I need to do it today, or can I wait? And if I wait too long, do I find that new market entrants have come in and taken that customer relationship? Then I find the switching cost to be really high to move that customer back into my environment. So the utilities that we work with recognize that there is a fast closing window of opportunity to extend their brand as the energy management brand and enter into this space. My fear is if they wait too long, that they'll retreat, their business model will retreat back to really just being the wires. And it's not a bad business model where you're the platform of the delivery of these services, but I think they miss out on some opportunities to realize the new revenues that are in the new model. So that's who our customer is. We are helping and working with utilities with solutions that allow them to bridge the gap between where they are today and where they think they need to be in the future by instrumenting the edge of the grid, home building with compute that allow the consumer to enjoy comfort and convenience around the services we offer, and then extract out from that piece of compute the benefits the utility can get by load balancing with their customers.
It's a compelling vision. I think it's one where that does smell of revolution.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, because
I think it is.
The one key paradigm that is being deconstructed is the idea of the one-way toll booth, which was the utility paradigm of the past.
Yeah.
You know, it came one way at you, and you paid for it, whether you want it or not. You get what you get, and you don't get upset.
And after you've already consumed it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in a very limited position to a new paradigm of being a handshake.
Right.
And what I hear you saying is the importance of enabling both sides of the handshake to work best together to achieve the optimal future we could have in this digital space.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's not an evolution, and it's not something that if you're sitting in a boardroom in a utility that you can create a 5-year plan for, because I think the pace of change, I think in 5 years, whatever you think of and put a 5-year plan together, within a year you tear it up and start all over again. I think that it's moving so quickly. I think business plans are going to be difficult to execute upon because it is changing so rapidly. So I think that handshake, as you call it, is something that we need to develop and offer and put in front of utilities, immediately. Again, just because I feel the sense of urgency, I see it. I see what the new market entrants, what their vision is for connecting with the customers, and I think they've got really aggressive plans. I don't think they're intentionally going after utility customers to pick them off. I think they have their own business model. Their own business models all drive on growth, and growth is, hey, what new service can I bundle with my existing service to get more customers signed on? So home security companies are bundling energy management, cable companies are bundling energy management, battery storage companies, rooftop solar companies, they're all getting into the utilities customer and they're giving the utilities customers a lot of new choices that they haven't had before. And utilities need to get in that game.
In our part, just to conclude our interview here, what's a burning priority that you're going to take away from ETS based on what you've learned so far?
I go back to what we started with. I just don't feel like there's that sense of urgency that I would have expected. This is my 5th ETS. It's a great event to have these kind of conversations, and these conversations don't happen in a lot of other events that I go to. And the same conversations, and I'm hearing some new things. We keep hearing about some new technologies coming. I mentioned blockchain already. That's one that's getting a lot of attention right now. But I still am not seeing aggressive action by the utilities to respond to this. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just my own frame what I'm looking at. But in general, I guess coming out of this, it's carrying that flag for the utilities that, hey, it's time. There are solutions out there. There's ways for utilities to get more engaged with their customers, but it's carrying that flag that, hey, it's time. Don't look back, 10 years from now, like the telecom industry looked like, 20 years ago, where the big telecom companies spent all the money to build the infrastructure, but they weren't the ones that got in front of the real revenues. The e-commerce companies, the internet companies were. I don't want to see utilities to face the same thing. There's an opportunity in front of them today to leverage the infrastructure they've already developed, extend it just beyond the meter to relationships with the customer, and drive and be in front of all the new services and revenues that are going to come from that. Don't wait. So I think that's the one thing, is keep getting out there, carrying the flag, and the revolution flag, I guess, if you will.
The time is now.
Time is now.
It was a real pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you, HG. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for tuning in to this unique interview that we had here, and take care.